Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to talk to Naveen Chandra, and he is the Director of Distribution at EssilorLuxottica. And if you're not familiar with them, he's going to tell you what they do, but it has to do with glasses, right? And sunglasses is the big product that they do, and for a lot of brands that you probably are familiar with if you've never heard of them. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, and he is their Director of Distribution. So we're going to hear a little bit about how they handle distribution, what their distribution network setup is like, what some of their operations look like, and we'll hear from Naveen how he is approaching some of these newer technologies within the distribution sector and kind of his view on how to bring together these technologies and the human worker together in the best way and what the future looks like. So, Naveen, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for the honor of having me. I'm very honored to be on this podcast. So I'm Naveen. As you said, I work with EssilorLuxottica.
Mm,
My team deals with the strategy part of the operation. So
okay.
we plan for labor, we plan the volume, and we plan how the volume is to be released to the floor, and then we also orchestrate in real time with the operations team. So we do the labor planning, we do wave planning, and we do the real time controlling, and we do slotting. And
Mm-hmm.
I have team that exclusively works on slotting in all our buildings on the campus. We also have a building in Tijuana, Mexico, where my team works on slotting and the same functions that I mentioned earlier as well. Coming to my employer, I know a lot of people are not aware about the company, and we are not just into the glasses, frames, and lenses, but we're also into insurance, we're also into apparel, footwear, accessories, and we're also into medtech. You might have
Really? Oh,
noticed
I
on
didn't know all that. Yeah,
Instagram,
interesting.
we're creating that wearables market right now along with Meta. And we are also into the eye care instruments.
Mm,
And if you don't know, we own Ray-Ban, Oakley, and Costa,
mm-hmm.
and many other retail brands and eye care companies. And we are also licensed manufacturer for a lot of luxury brands like Gucci, Prada, and all that stuff. So we have quite a few of operations. But our warehouse in Atlanta predominantly deals with frames. Um,
Mm,
so this is where we distribute to North America. Um, so our SKU count is very high, as you can imagine.
I bet.
Different colored frame can make it a different SKU. So we deal with high number of SKUs, but low differences in the dimensions. There are not many differences in the size of the product that we deal with, but it has its own complexities. So we work with the different channels: wholesale, retail, web, e-commerce, and we also have some international exports.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I didn't know about EssilorLuxottica until I want to say maybe a year, 2 years ago, when somebody from your team, I forget their name at the time being, but I saw them speak at a conference and they said like, oh, the same thing as you. Like, well, if you've never heard of us, we have Ray-Ban and Oakley. And I said, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it was like all under one umbrella like that was happening, and
Yeah,
very interesting. And obviously, as you said, a ton of SKUs there to manage and deal with. And so tell us a little bit about like because you're in Atlanta, right? As you mentioned, the facility there that handles the North America distribution. So tell us a little bit about the facility, because you mentioned that there's a lot of SKUs, right? But dimension wise, they're kind of very similar because a lot of frames are about the same size, right? So how do you store them? What does the operation kind of look like there?
yeah. So we have four predominant types of products that we deal with here. One, frames, obviously core
Mm,
of our business. And then the second one is wearables, which is Ray-Ban Meta, Oakley Meta, that is just
okay.
exploding in the past few months. And then Oakley, which is our apparel, footwear, accessories business, like all Oakley t-shirts, helmets, goggles, jackets, bags, boots,
Mm,
everything. They're in a separate warehouse. And then we also serve our retail footprint, like Sunglass Set, which is one of our retail chains.
sure.
and lens crafters. We also supply their shopping bags and whatever they need in their stores. We
Wait,
store.
do you also own Sunglass Hut and Lens
Yeah,
Crafters?
yeah,
I didn't know that either. Oh my god! Wow,
yeah, we
this
own
this thing is just
Sunglass
like
Hut.
never ending. Yeah.
Yeah, lens crafters, Target Optical, but yeah, we own quite a few outlets.
Interesting. Okay, and so you're not only fulfilling and distributing to directly to the consumer, but and then other retail outlets, but then you're supplying all the supplies essentially for your own retail
Yeah,
outlets as
yeah.
well.
So
Interesting.
we distribute to our retail stores and we distribute to other wholesalers like Walmart, Nordstrom, and other bigger retailers as well. So in our eyewear warehouse, we have a few warehouses in our campus. Eyewear warehouse predominantly stores the frames and the accessories that's needed for the frames. We have mixed media. We have some racking where we store as reserve. And then we have AMR type shelves or racking where we have our forward picking or active picking. So we have this reserve active model, and this is the same model across all our warehouses. So yeah, that's the primary types of products that we deal with. The complexity with the apparel business is that we have wide variations in the sizes of the product.
Sure.
And it comes from all over the world. And even for our eyewear business, it's the same. We got manufacturers all over the world. And we're a vertically integrated company. So we make our own products and we own all parts of our supply chain. So that gives us a lot of control over our supply chain. So we have that flexibility as well.
Mm. Yeah, interesting, and interesting to hear the size variation too, because I imagine that makes a difference on storage and things like that. How you have to put it in, and you mentioned you're responsible for slotting as well, right? So,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about how you're approaching slotting, because there's been a lot of kind of I think AI coming into play from in the slotting world, and we've seen some solutions come out and WMSs that have added like AI components to them. So how are you approaching slotting, and are you
So
using any AI in that?
yeah, so we actually looked at using AI for our slotting.
Mm-hmm.
But what we realized was that AI is better suited to improve the forecast accuracy. So once I have the forecast, slotting is just an Excel equation. I don't need to build a fancy algorithm to create a slotting plan from the forecast. So forecast is our basis, and our corporate team already is making used waves and using AI for forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
From slotting perspective, my team has built a small model, not very fancy, just an Excel-based model. So they get forecast into it and then adjust some variables based on the season. If it's peak for sunglasses, or if it's peak for goggles, or if it's peak for just something else. We build that into it, and based on the order pool that we have, we make adjustments. So our slotting plan is very dynamic. It's not just we slot it and forget it for 6 months. We update it every week. So our order forecast, as we get the new forecast, we look at our, like, if something is moving fast next week, we upgrade it to a bigger storage type. Or if something is not moving fast, we downgrade it to a smaller storage type where I will have only like a week's supply. But for the fast moving items, I may have 2 weeks or 3 weeks supply. So we try to adapt to the seasonality, and the weekly behavior of our orders and slotting.
Interesting. And I'm curious, like on the slotting side, because there's a lot of different thoughts and approaches to how to slot and what's the right way to do it and where should you place the items and things like that. So I'm curious, like your perspective on that, and maybe what's one thing that you think is like key to slotting that maybe people might often overlook.
Yeah, so I always start with storage space because that's always limited, and we're always in need of more storage space. And especially in an environment like us where the number of SKUs grows and just grows, it's imperative that we have to optimize our storage space. And then comes the seasonality. So if I slot a product in a location today, it may not stay there after 2 weeks. So we try to optimize those movements because just because the season changed, I don't want to keep it moving and it will increase my labor cost. So our perspective is to balance the cost of moving product versus the cost of slotting it right. So we try to make a judgment between upgrading and downgrading different products based on the forecast that we get, and also work with our operations team to look at the priorities. For example, if I have a more than expected volume, I may need all my workforce in picking and not in adjusting my slotting. So that is a real time decision we make depending on how we are doing in the daily volume, hour by hour. So, like I said, my slotting team and the work planning team, they work hand in hand in coordinating all these movements.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. And you mentioned that you have some AMR shelving type of
Yeah.
solutions in place, right? So how does that play into the slotting model? Is the slotting just static, traditional locations, and the robotic solution kind of does its own thing? Or how does that kind of come together?
So, if I talk about our automation strategy, this would make more sense.
Sure.
So, I'll start with the robotic strategy or
Okay.
automation.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
So, our strategy is to start from a macro business case and then go from there, look at our growth strategy and what products or what channels are expanding, and then convert that into operational complexities or like where operations will face challenge in terms of picking or is packing going to be your constraint or your sortation. So we make those constraints from the macro business case and then look at what automation will have to find to address these gaps. So over the years, we have tested and tried a few technologies and finally found what technology is good for what kind of operation. So for our operation, we have identified AMR as the right fit. So what we tried is to get the racking first and then get the AMRs later. So initially we had a regular like racking, just standard racking, nothing fancy, just a few shelves. They go up 8, 9 levels where some levels can be accessed by hand. Some you need a work assist vehicle or some other equipment so that a ladder. We replaced those with the AMR racks so all the levels can be accessed by people.
Okay.
And they also are denser compared to the standard racks. And what this will do is it improved the inventory accuracy and it improved the density of the product and it will help us make the transition to AMRs very smooth.
Mm.
So just imagine if we're starting to install racking and AMRs at the same time and versus installing the racking a couple of years ahead of the AMRs. So we found the benefits of AMR racks. And then as we step into our future, this will make our transition much smoother than what it could be without having the racks in place.
Gotcha. Interesting. And when you say AMR racks, are you referring to like AMRs with shelving units on top of it, basically?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. All
People
right,
call
cool.
them differently in different places.
Definitely. So very interesting there. And I guess tell us a little bit about, so the AMRs are in place now, correct? Right? You're utilizing them.
The racks are in place, but we're going to AMRs very soon.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I see what you're saying now. So you've put the racking in place, but then you will just basically bring the AMRs in to now work with those racking. Interesting. And how are you, I mean, new technologies in general, right? I mean, you're on the conference circuit. That's the last time we saw each other, right? So you're seeing like all the latest, I'm sure, and all the very interesting things that people are coming up with in our industry. So tell us a little bit about how do you approach that and how are you sorting through some of these new technologies to determine like what is viable and what is like a little too early at this point?
Yeah, like I said earlier, we go through a test and learn process. So we find the appropriate technologies for our operation. We do a small pilots and we start small. We look at the impact for throughput or quality or the cost. and then we try to scale. So we have a very big footprint across the world, and we have ASRS, we have AMRs, and we have each picking robots, sortation. We have all different technologies in our footprint,
Mm.
and we have learnings from all these installations or all these projects. So the way we start our automation is we start the project in the smallest possible area where the impact is not as much if the project fails, right? And we also place a very big emphasis on a recovery plan. And what's the backup plan if the automation dies down on me? So
Mm.
the advantage of starting small is we can take that risk. So while doing the project, we understand the risk factors, where it could go wrong, and then we make a plan, and then we scale to the next facility. So the AMRs that we are planning to bring in have already been tested in a different small facility
Oh,
or in
okay.
a small different operation. So we're sure about our learnings and also the reputation of the automation provider and the service that they're going to offer and their match to our operation. These are some of the factors that we consider when selecting the technology.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. So testing in a smaller operation, right?
Right,
To see
smaller and
like,
controlled environment.
yeah, like how does it work with our product, and does it work? I guess that's probably the big question, right, in the first place. And then also, I think that's a great point too, right? Evaluating like, well, how is the service, right, and how is the company that's providing the technology supporting us? So very interesting there. And now, when we look at some of these technologies, and especially like on the robotic side and things, there's often a question of the human element, right? Is the human element being
Most important.
removed, or is it still going to be together, right? So I'm curious, like your approach to that. How do you find the balance between the technology and still the human worker in there?
Yeah, so we are very far from a lights out operation today.
Hmm.
I know we're making very good improvements across the industry. We're coming up with very good technologies, but there will still be humans in the warehouse. And every process or every technology that we're designing, humans are going to interact with the technology. So the technologies or the whatever tools that we're building, they're good with routine. They at this point they're not very good to deal with ambiguity or exceptions or edge cases, which is where the human expert is still helpful.
Hmm.
So I have seen cases where a small change in the routine for a machine resulted in a big chain of events, which eventually snowballed and resulted in stopping the automation altogether.
Hmm.
So that's where humans make the essential part of resilience. So if we want to build a resilient solution, make the solution in such a way that the machines or the tools or the technology is also working along with humans, not working against humans or trying to take the human element out. I have a great example that I have seen, and
Sure.
I talk about this classic example every time. So this was long back in my career where we had an ASRS, and the design of the inbound stations was it went horribly wrong.
Mm.
So what happened was there is this workstation, just a table, and with a monitor and an RF gun. So what people have to do is get a pallet of units to the table, bend, bring them to the desk, and then there is a conveyor with two levels. The
Mm.
bottom level will give them totes, and they put the products in the totes, and they lift the tote, put them on the conveyor on the top. So initially, the ASRS was empty. So all the totes were coming empty. They were light. So people were able to put product, lift them, put
Yeah.
them on the top conveyor. But as we went through, the totes started becoming heavy.
Mm.
And some people started complaining. Some people just started filling the bins half. So
Mm.
the ASRS capacity was severely hit. But that's the secondary concern. But the biggest concern was these totes are like 40 to 50 pounds each. So lifting them all day and putting them on an overhead conveyor,
Yeah.
that was a big safety risk. So from technology side, the solution was great. The ASRS doesn't need anybody supervising it or like managing it. But people that are working with this technology were severely under optimized and are at a danger of injury or something. So my lesson from this is when we create the designs, we should not ignore the human elements. Wherever the human interacts with the system or the tool or technology, it should be safe, the first and foremost priority. Then there shouldn't be a lot of cognitive load on people making decisions.
Hmm.
The next step that they need to take should be really easy. They don't even have to think about it. So that's my perspective on human in the loop, safety, cognitive load, and the ability to make the next move. This should be minimized.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great example, right, of looking at that and thinking of that. And I can see why you share that often, right? Because I mean, it is like you said, it's like, oh, the technology worked how it was supposed to work, right? It was effective. But then the human part of it, right, was not effective. It was ineffective in a sense where it's causing these potential risks, right? Certainly the safety risk in one, right? As soon as you said it was like overhead, that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, oh, that's like an ergonomic nightmare, right? And I'm
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
like,
exactly.
I'm thinking like, well, you can't necessarily put everybody at that station, right? Because somebody maybe can't reach it. Somebody maybe can't lift the weight that high to be able to do that, or do that repetitively all day long too, is serious strain on the body. So
Yeah.
very interesting perspective on that, and good story to highlight that. So I'm curious, when you think about some of these things, and it sounds like you're very thoughtful in the approach to implementation, as you talked about the phasing in of this different racking to get ready for the AMRs, right? How do you evaluate the technology, and what questions maybe do you ask to the solution provider on how they are considering those types of things, like the safety and the human use and the design around the human element of it all?
So when we work with our providers, obviously we go each process by process. So we start with the macro picture. So this is the overall flow. Inbound comes here, picking happens here, and we pick on cards, ship it. So that's, I mean, I'm making it very simple, but we
Yeah.
start with the macro flow, right?
I'm sure it's a lot more complex than
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And then we go into each of the areas. We go into each of the areas, and then each step of the process. And then in each step of the process, we talk to the providers or the solution designers who are building the solution, and we sit with our operations team. So our operations team is very experienced, and they have experienced a lot of implementations than I did in my career. So they're treasure trove of knowledge. And my engineering team, obviously, they're working with the solutions, our solution provider. So we sit in the room and we discuss what could go wrong and
Mm.
what would be the pain point for the operator if an operator is in this process. And how do I reduce that? And we try to put the complexity in the planning and the implementation or in the design. And we try to reduce the complexity on part of the operator. Like I said earlier, the cognitive load on the operator side should be as low as possible.
Mhm.
So if I'm a receiving associate and I'm receiving glasses, I should be just scan, put. I don't
Mm.
have to like, okay, which this has 50 barcodes. Which barcode do I scan?
Right.
Okay, now I have 10 totes. Which tote should I put this in? So we try to reduce the cognitive load and we try to shift the complexity from operator part to the systemic part or the planning part.
Mm.
Another thing that I want to mention is I'm actively researching on how to make the automation implementations as less complex as possible and do not result in failures. I recently proposed a framework called Automation Readiness Integration Framework. So I'm expanding it and also working on a book. So the
Mm.
practitioners or the people who are entering the industry will have that ready reference before they actually jump into a project and learn, okay, this went wrong and I could have prevented it. So that's another recent interest that I am pursuing.
Yeah, interesting. So you're writing a book, you said.
Yeah.
I should have introduced you as an author too. I didn't know
Well,
that. So
it's not published, so I'm not an author yet.
yes, yeah. So very interesting there. And do you have a name for the book yet?
Yeah, it's a smart warehousing building with resilience.
Ah, very nice. I like that. And resilience, obviously, a huge thing in the supply chain right now, and will be for a long time, I think. So,
I-
so very interesting, and we'll look forward to reading that for sure. So really love the approach there too. I mean, reducing the cognitive load, as you mentioned, and you gave an interesting example there on, if I receive a product and it's got like 50 barcodes on it, right? I have to think and remember which is the right one to scan, right?
Right.
And I've seen that in my experience before where we had a product and it had a serial number on it, right? But the serial number was like very close to the product's barcode as well, right? So
Right.
oftentimes when they had to receive and scan the serial number too, but oftentimes we would see the serial number would be like the product number,
Yeah.
and then it would cause an issue in the system, right? So we'd have to work through that. I'm curious, like, how do you, because something like that, right, comes from a different department typically, like they're the ones setting up, like, how do you work on or
It was
collaboratively work to make that easier?
Yeah, this was an extreme example. I haven't
Yeah.
seen in real life, but the labels that we encounter every day, they're very
Mhm.
clean and clear. The operators won't have
Okay.
to think twice about scanning which barcode. There's only
Yeah.
one barcode.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And
Interesting. Okay.
also, even if there are two or three barcodes, the RFMs are smart enough to identify which barcode they have to scan.
Mm.
So in the GS1 barcoding, there are certain identifiers for each barcode. So you could cut the value that you don't need, or you could just get the value you need with the RFMs. You can program your guns so that you don't scan all the stray barcodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And so we talked about technology here. I mean,
Mhm.
it sounds like you're looking at AMRs right now within your
Yeah.
operation. But I mean, aside from that, what kind of technologies, just in general, whether it's something you're going to use in your operation or just like in the industry as a whole, like what really has your kind of attention right now? What do you think is really cool?
Yeah. Recently, we bought a company that does the transcription for the physicians.
Mm,
So this is only for eye care professionals. So when you
yeah.
go to the doctor, you have all these discussions with the doctor. This AI assistant, it just transcribes and gives the summary, like our meeting AI agents. That's a cool thing that was happening in the past few weeks. From distribution side, we were looking at AI decision assistant, kind of like ChatGPT for operations.
Yeah.
So as an operator, as a supervisor or ops manager, I talk to this AI and look at my volume. Okay, so how am I doing in receiving? I ask the questions in natural language, and then it'll give me what's happening. And I'll ask the question like, can I move my people from receiving to picking and be able to meet the SLA for web?
Mm,
So we're trying to build that kind of assistant. So that's exciting. And then my personal perspective on the promising technologies, I would say this AI decision assistant is one of the biggest things that can help distribution.
mm,
And also, physical AI is another thing that would bridge the gap between the machines not responding to edge cases. So right now, whenever there is a change in routine, the machines they will not behave well. So if they can sense and detect the change and adapt to that change, that would transform how we are using our automation equipment today. So I would very much love to have that kind of physical AI with the equipment so that they can adopt instead of people going there and adjusting the workflows or making different decisions. That would be wonderful for distribution.
mm.
And last but not least is the computer vision for quality control.
Sure.
Because as we deal with high value products, quality is an important factor. We try to be 100% in terms of quality. So using computer vision for quality or RFID technology would be very great for us in that aspect.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think the computer vision, I mean, there's certainly a lot happening with that right now. And I think it's a really, really promising technology for the warehouse and distribution environment for sure. So if we look into the future, right, in your mind, in your eyes, what do you see the kind of future, the warehouse of the future? What do you think that looks like?
I wouldn't say it would be a lights out operation. What I would imagine is there would be a control tower for a warehouse, and all these machines they interact with each other with physical AI, and then the people in the control tower they will have access to this AI decision making tools. So they make the decisions on the fly, and the warehouse would be able to respond to any changes in real time. Like it is very adaptive and resilient to any changes. So right now, what's happening is during the peak times, we try to scale our labor too much, and sometimes if the volumes doesn't show up, that's a waste. And if the volume is more than expected, we scramble our resources, and we tend to miss maybe SLAs sometimes. But in future, that wouldn't be a big concern. So the warehouses will be able to scale up and down as needed in real time. Yeah, that's what I would imagine if physical AI, computer vision, and the decision making, if it all comes through.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Kind of all the stuff you're looking for, right? It sounds
Yeah.
like so. Very nice there. So, very much appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us here today, Naveen. And very interesting to learn. First, very interesting to learn about all the different businesses that EssilorLuxottica owns, right? I learned even more today about what you all do, and really interesting to hear about your distribution operations and some of your approaches to things like slotting and automation and technology, and that human design approach as well, which I think is extremely critical for an operation. So really appreciate you sharing, and we'll definitely be looking forward to seeing your book come out. So if people are interested in learning more or connecting with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I can be reached on LinkedIn anytime. You can find me with my name, Naveen Chandra. I recently started a comic strip as well. So if we want to collaborate on the comic strip, I would welcome that opportunity as well.
All right, fantastic. And do we have a potential time frame of when the book is going to come out?
I have a contract with Springer Nature to deliver it by February,
Okay.
hoping to finish it by that time.
You got a deadline. All right. So definitely we'll check if you have a good on-time delivery metric there for your book. We'll see, but we'll be looking out for that for sure, and making sure we share that as well. And we'll definitely share all the links to connect with Naveen on LinkedIn at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes here. So Naveen, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for getting me on the show.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesaresexy.com and get your own.